Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. Great to have back on the program State Senator Jerry Cirino from Kirtland, Ohio, and here we are at Lakeland Community College. Thank you to them for allowing us to borrow the facility.
Thanks, John. Great to be here with you, and it's great to be at Lakeland Community College, where once upon a time I served as chairman of the Board of Trustees. This is a great institution, and it's a major part of our community here in Lake County.
Trustees have an important role, even more so now with Senate Bill 1 becoming law, the Advance Ohio Higher Education Act. It's already making a difference on campuses, especially about leadership and guiding these universities, higher education in the right direction for the future.
Senate Bill 1 began making a difference even before the governor signed the bill. And since that time, more progress has been made, and I'm just delighted with the progress I'm hearing from presidents of our 14 universities and our community colleges as well, and from trustees and even faculty members have talked to me about how they're delighted with the progress that is being made in all of the aspects of Senate Bill 1 that require compliance actions to be taken by the university.
You know, it's interesting, however, when you read today's mainstream media, Cleveland.com, there was a story a couple of days ago on July 14th. The headline here is DEI offices shuttered, costs mount as Ohio universities comply with Senate Bill 1. As in, there's a huge cost. It's costing universities to shut down these DEI departments, division, exclusion, and inequality, as you've heard me describe them, DEI. But I thought you had a great quote in this story. You said, quote, "We didn't fund DEI programs in the first place. They funded themselves out of their operating appropriations, so now they're removing them. They're going to save money by removing these programs." Interesting how all of the stories in the narrative is about the additional cost that Senate Bill 1 is having on universities,
right,
but it's actually saving money.
Well, I thought the article was actually somewhat balanced, but the headline was not. The headline presumed that there was a big cost burden suddenly thrust on these universities. And that is not the case. And it's not just DEI. I mean, many of the universities are eliminating other programs that are tangential to DEI, focusing on serving specific groups to the exclusion of others. Those were all costing these universities money, for sure. How do you shut a whole bunch of things down and cost you money?
Well, Ohio State was spending how much on?
Ohio State was spending about $14 million plus a year just on their DEI infrastructure.
It really was. It was really a tremendous addition to the bureaucracy of higher education, and this is one way to streamline it and make it more effective, efficient, and quite frankly, fair.
And I think actually, John, that the cost was higher than $14 million because DEI personnel were embedded in every aspect, in every college, the medical school, the law school, et cetera, with people that were maybe not full-time DEI, but they were focused on that as part of their job, and those will be eliminated. So I think the savings will be substantial. I don't believe for a minute that there's anything material in terms of increases in costs. And by the way, if there's some burden that universities have to bear in order to have an environment that is not discriminatory, then I think that's just fine.
Well, we've been talking a lot about Senate Bill 1 and having you on the program about education rather than indoctrination. And we heard from professors over the last two trustee symposiums that were held there at the Ohio State House, hosted by you and former Senate President Huffman, who is now Speaker of the House, Matt Huffman, about how, yes, there was litmus testing going on. You had qualified professors who were not even able to make it through the first round of interviews because whatever they had to answer and provide as a written statement didn't match the faculty's desires, where the faculty was more or less running the show, calling the shots, and not really the trustees. And now that is beginning to change.
The litmus testing was very blatant. You had to submit sometimes a written explanation of how you would inculcate DEI into your coursework, your course presentations, your lectures, your writings, et cetera. And if you did not present the right story you simply had no chance of getting hired or getting a second interview.
But people are coming to Ohio, right? I saw a story in the Dayton Daily News this week because the narrative has been, oh, we're chasing students out of Ohio. Enrollment will continue to drop. Well, in 2024, enrollment actually increased by about 3.5% across Ohio, and community colleges, 5.1%, I think were the numbers. Do professors, qualified individuals, want to come to Ohio to teach in higher education?
There's no question, and probably the best example I could give you right now is that the Chase Center, which is one of our civic centers, 5 of the civic centers that we have in Ohio, right now, they have just finished their hiring for the first semester coming up in the fall, and they have hired 18 professors, distinguished professors from outside of Ohio, and 1 from the United Kingdom. So distinguished professors, experienced, well-respected, well-published professors are in fact not leaving Ohio. They are coming to Ohio, and we will see that in all of the other 4 centers as well. And I think even in the institutions that don't have centers right now, that Ohio is being viewed as a state that is jumping ahead in terms of higher ed reform. Students and faculty will want to be a part of that.
The Centers for Civics and Government received $24 million as part of their operating costs within the budget. And we're really seeing the difference that these are starting to make as more of them are really coming up online and ramping up. But we had the 2 professors on from Ohio State who really talked about, yeah, there has been a huge shift to the left for years on college campuses, especially within the faculty. Something really needed to happen here. And that these centers of civics and government will really make a difference, not only for the faculty, but just in how these courses are taught, even to law students. I know President McCauley has talked a great deal about how he was concerned that you would have students who were totally unprepared to just debate facts. And if you can't do that, if your feelings get hurt, or you walk away from an argument just because somebody has a diametrically opposed opinion of what yours is, then you're not really serving the greater good here. And that's one of the important things about these centers.
Well, it's not just the centers, and although that is an important part of it, but we really want to see that kind of environment of intellectual diversity, not just accepting it, but fostering it in all of our universities. It should be a part of the university culture.
Civics and government, also an important curriculum or class to require, which is part of what Senate Bill 1 does, correct? At the basic level of higher education. There has been some complaints about what that is costing some of these universities to implement, but it seems more and more, and maybe I'm just wrong about this, but it seems that there is a real disconnect about just basic principles of history and government, not only Ohio history, but also history of the United States and the founding document that the country basically was established under.
We have a very sad situation in terms of the knowledge of the average American about our history, our country's founding, our founding documents, et cetera. And I think part of, this isn't going to solve the entire problem, but it's going to help, requiring every graduate with a bachelor's degree starting in the next 4-year cohort to have minimum of 3 hours in civics education. The stats that I've seen are just unbelievable, actually. A study done recently by a very well-known and respected organization did a sampling of questions, the same questions that are being used for those that are immigrating to the U.S. and looking to get citizenship, right? And you only need 60% to pass it. It's a multiple choice series of questions. 36% of U.S. citizens would pass that test today.
That's amazing.
And
disturbing.
And there were some other surveys that said that 60% of those surveyed U.S. citizens did not know which countries we fought in World War II, and 57% did not know how many justices we have on the Supreme Court, I could go on with the lack of basic knowledge about our history, our founding, people who have not read founding documents or major speeches, like Martin Luther King's speech from the jail. These are things that need to be remedied. People need to understand. Again, it's the U.S. history, what I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're not trying to mask mistakes that we have made in this country, but what we need to do is to balance it and make sure that everybody understands what the facts are. Let's understand the difference between capitalism and socialism. The lack of that understanding is why so many young people today have become very attached to the idea of socialism. It's because they don't understand historically how bad socialism has been around the globe and how lifting up of people is the result of capitalism.
Well, there certainly has been a level of indoctrination in far-left politics, and you've heard me tell the story on this program about how my daughter was an education major, elementary education major at one of the universities in Ohio, and called me very upset one evening about how her professor walked into the elementary education class and said, we're going to be talking about politics in this course because education is politics and you all need to be more, quote, woke. And so it's been there, I mean, without a doubt. And in fact, I can remember not that long ago when I received a phone call from a reporter in Columbus who wanted to know if I would be able to help set up an interview with, at the time, Senator Rob Portman. I said, well, I work for the state Senate. Of course, it's United States Senator Rob Portman. You'll have to get in contact with his office. But it was clear that there was a true disconnect from young reporters who either, A, never covered local government, city council, boards of education, much less state government, and they don't learn that in college, which I found disturbing.
I still get asked by constituents how I like living in Washington.
Right.
So we have a long way to go. And the one thing that's remarkable to me of this study that I was looking at recently is that, because this bill is about Ohio, okay? Obviously, I think this is a civics problem all around the country for sure. But in Ohio, the same survey with the same types of questions that were very similar to the ones on the citizenship test, 59% of the Ohioans would not have passed.
How does that happen?
It happens because our educational system is broken and has let us down in terms of education on matters that are so important to our country, our founding, and our economic principles that we live by in the U.S.
Right. In the same story that we were talking about from Cleveland.com with Laura Hancock's story, she says Kent State University estimates the total cost of implementing Senate Bill 1 will range from $1.5 million to $2 million annually, a university spokeswoman said. When it comes to implementing these types of programs, I would say if you're actually going to learn something solid that you carry with you throughout life about the founding of the country, about the founding of the state of Ohio, $1.5 to $2 million is not that big of a number.
Well, first of all, it's not an incremental number, okay? They may be saving $4 million by not doing a whole bunch of programs that they have to cancel now because of compliance, and this may be costing them $1 million. I doubt that that's a correct number in the first place, but let's say even if it is correct, it's not a net number. They have to be saving money by canceling all these other programs. And again, my point is, even if it is costing some incremental amount of money, DEI programs were put in place at the university's expense, not by appropriation from us, yet they resulted in institutional discrimination, rampant in our universities. Okay, why would it not be a good idea to spend even $1 million of incremental money to avoid discrimination in our universities? I mean, it just makes no sense, and I think the media is looking for ways to make Senate Bill 1, which is now law, of course, make it look like it's something that's inappropriate or too costly.
Yeah, trying to continue to demonize Senate Bill 1 still doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, there was the petition drive for the referendum. it was clearly not going to be going anywhere because that's a steep climb regarding certified signatures that you have to have. Yet it received a tremendous amount of attention. It was all, you see the media actually rooting against Senate Bill 1. And from from Cleveland.com's podcast, this was a comment from a setup. I'll read a couple actually comments here, but this was a setup to the podcast. A story that intros the podcast that was basically created by AI. It says, we've said all along that State Senator Jerry Cirino's giant higher education bill is basically aimed at converting campuses into fascist training centers and will cost Ohio dearly in top students and educators. And then it says, sounds like schools out of state see the same thing. And so they were referring to the Eastern Michigan University campaign trying to recruit kids because of Senate Bill 1. Well, maybe some out-of-the-box thinking on behalf of EMU, but still the numbers don't show students and brain drain and professors, as you were just alluding to, leaving the state because of Senate Bill 1. You see them moving into the state.
That's exactly right.
But the Fascist Training Center, I mean, that is such hyperbole, and it doesn't belong in describing this. It's one thing for editorial pages, I would say, to disagree with whatever the General Assembly passes and is signed into law. But it's another thing to get into personal name calling like this, and I'll have you respond to this. This is from the publisher during a recent podcast from Cleveland.com. Chris Quinn says, you want to come to a place where we have freedom of thought? You want to come to a place where you'll have true debate and not be pounded by the nonsense Jerry Cirino once pounded into your head. I wouldn't send my kid to an Ohio school now. I would send them out of state just to get away from this kind of nonsense. And last month he said, I think they're really vile human beings. Rob McCauley, the Senate President, Jerry Cirino, the Senate Finance Chair, Matt Huffman, the House Speaker, they're vile human beings. And man, there is a special place in hell for them when everything is reconciled. I nearly fell out of my chair because I worked in broadcast news for 25 years, mainly covering Ohio politics. And this level of rhetoric and rancor is totally unprofessional, and uncalled for as well. And when you hear these things, not only from Senate Bill 1, but about you personally, and also about the budget process, vile human beings, a special place in hell, what's your response to that? I mean, this is not the media that I grew up reading or working for more than 2 decades.
Well, there is so much to react to that you just talked about. So let me start with a couple things. First of all, if you read history, if you've studied civics in world history, you'd know that fascist newspapers in Europe represented a single point of view, right, of their government. They were not balanced. They were pushing a particular narrative. Does that sound familiar? If Chris Quinn wouldn't send his kids to an Ohio university, maybe he should consider Eastern Michigan University. They apparently are unable to attract students because of their quality, so they're looking to attract students away from Ohio because of some narrative that they are pushing. Look, he gets personal all the time. We're not going to go there. I think the Cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer, as I have said publicly, as I said at the City Club presentation back in May, they long ago gave up any sense of objectivity. And that's their choice to do. I think their business success or lack thereof today speaks to how that strategy is going. And I think it's only going to get worse. They lose readership every month. And so they don't represent the community. I live in this community. I have lived in this community for almost 74 years. I know this community well. I remember when we had multiple newspapers that presented different points of view. What you have now with a single metropolitan newspaper is a lack of objectivity, and it's what happens when you have no competition.
Well, it used to be one thing when you would see the editorial page be far to the left on something, but there was definitely a wall between the editorial page and the newsroom. And now that there is no longer a wall. It's basically, this is the angle, this is the narrative that you're going to take, and I mean, it's quite evident. So
They have also, John, started accepting, I think it was a policy maybe a year ago, they started accepting letters to the editor that are unsigned.
I saw
Now,
that.
how ridiculous is that? They probably write them.
Right. By the way, you want to read my column in On the Record this week, The Views the News Excludes. And to get to that, there'll be a link in the newsletter that you can subscribe to as well. Just go to ohiosenate.gov, go over to news where the first drop down called On the Record. But I have kept a running tally and history of some of the rancorous over-the-top commentary coming from Cleveland.com. And I'm just going to use their own words and show how unprofessional they've been. I guess before we leave Senate Bill 1, what do you think finally, where was the critical mass? What made Senate Bill 1 and the effort before that, Senate Bill 83 and the prior GA that almost made it across the finish line? What was that critical mass moment that finally made the change, that finally reached the point that there needs to be change in our higher education curriculum and in how we run higher education in Ohio? Did it come from within, or do you think maybe it was percolating from within, but change had to come from outside somehow?
I think Senate Bill 83 made a very strong case, and we spent a lot of time working on that. I think and we had the votes in the House to pass Senate Bill 83. The problem was the Speaker of the House at the time, Stevens, did not support the bill. I don't know what his rationale was, if there was a rationale. He just would not get behind it. And we even told them, we made a deal on 83 that took out the no strike provision, right? And DEI programs would only have been voluntary, right? So by not addressing and dealing with the bill as it stood at that point, Stevens is, I think, in my opinion, responsible for what we ended up with in Senate Bill 1, which was to retain the no strike provision, or reinstitute it, I should say, as well as to make DEI totally out and not voluntary. Those two changes for the opponents of this bill could have come out better if they had supported Senate Bill 83. And I think it was very foolish of them, very foolish of the unions, teachers unions, faculty unions, to not support 83, because now they've got to deal with something that's much more stringent and regarding the reform. I don't regret making those additions at all. I think they are the right things to do, and they're going to help make higher education in Ohio better.
Well, instead of negotiating in good faith, they decided to play politics. And negotiating in good faith is always the way to go. And obviously, the university exists, like the good work they do here at Lakeland Community College, exists for the students, exists to educate. Universities don't exist for the faculty. Let's talk a little bit about maybe some upcoming business that we have during what we call the summer recess, but the members from both chambers go back to their districts and work there in the district and then usually head back in the fall. But the House has announced plans to come back for a veto override session July 21st, specifically regarding the governor's vetoes on the property tax reform that the General Assembly passed. Property tax reform that abolished replacement and emergency levies, the levies that fall outside of the 20 mil floor. The reforms that also empowered the county budget commissions and a couple other items. Do you support that? And what do you know? Are we going to be coming back? Will the Senate be coming back in summer, or is that still yet to be determined?
Well, I think we're working on dates on the Senate coming back. I think we had some members traveling, some out of the country, that would make coming back difficult to do, because we need more votes to override a veto than we would ordinarily have to pass a bill. But I think you're going to find that we will be very much in sync with the House. The House has to initiate the override because it was a House budget bill in the first place. And so I was disappointed. I liked a lot of, the governor agreed with us on a lot of things, and I appreciated that. On the Brown's economic development package, the flat tax of 2.75%, which is huge for the state of Ohio. And I was disappointed that he vetoed the property tax. Chairman Stewart and I, in conference committee, which was the last group finalizing the budget and reconciling our differences, we spent a lot of time crafting what the final language was on property tax reform. And I think it would not solve all of the property tax issues, but it was a great first step in creating more transparency for local voters and giving more authority to local decision makers in their budget commissions, in county commissioners' offices, auditors and treasurers to make more decisions that are better informed to be able to roll back some property taxes where it's appropriate.
Of all the issues that your office has heard from constituents about, would you say property taxes has been the number one thing for quite a while, or maybe not?
You know, strangely enough, the number one issue that we heard most from was on when marijuana was being discussed, recreational marijuana. We got a lot of crazy calls, but a big volume of calls. I would say property tax is right behind it, certainly. And when we get out in our districts, I think that's also the topic that comes up most. People want some relief, and we need to take action to do that. But what people need to understand is that the state does not levy a nickel of property taxes. In fact, we pay $2 billion a year in rollback and property tax givebacks from the state. $2 billion a year. People don't know that. We're paying part of everybody's property taxes.
And that's part of the transparency component that was part of the discussion, that we need to make sure that people understand exactly what the cost would be for a new levy or what they're voting on, and to try to, as the Senate President talked about, bring the property tax system in Ohio back within the anti-inflationary guardrails as originally intended.
That's right. And I've actually had constituents come and talk to me about taxes, property taxes, and I asked them, did you vote for your last school levy? And they said, yes, we did. We want great schools. I said, okay, that's wonderful. You just voted a property tax increase for yourself. And if your community, and that's what you want, fine, then don't complain about property taxes. And people just don't understand millage. They don't understand the 20 mil floor. They don't understand emergency levies. So our legislation that we will hope to reinstate back into the budget with the override will be a major step in transparency and local control over taxes. This effort that's going on around the state right now of gathering signatures to eliminate property taxes.
Yeah, what would that do? Because, you know, there seems to be a lot of people who say, well, I'd vote for that. But what would happen, though? Wouldn't you have to, in some way, some other tax would have to go up, I would think, just to fund a percentage of what would be lost?
It's not a well thought out process, to say the least. I'm being very kind here. We collect in around the state about a little over $21 billion a year in property taxes. And it's not just for schools. That's about 70% of it. But if you look in your tax bill, you'll see all of the organizations and entities that your taxes go to.
Libraries,
library funds, could be a local police and fire levy, could be a senior citizens levy, could be
public transportation.
The Adams Board. Yeah. I mean, it could be a lot of things. If the property taxes were viewed as unconstitutional and uncollectible, all of those organizations would have no funding at all. And I don't think this group has properly thought this thing through. I actually had one proponent tell me, well, we're going to get rid of property taxes, and it's your job in the state to figure out how to make up for it. So to me, their logic is, we're going to create a huge problem here because we want to, and you're going to have to figure out how to solve the problem. That's not the best way to go about things.
Right. It would leave a big hole in the budget, most likely of which would not be completely filled by even like a 25 or 30% increase in sales tax.
Oh, the sales tax would have to probably triple in order to come close to making up for that. And there might be other taxes that would have to be raised as well. And our caucus, the Republican caucus, does not have an affinity for raising taxes. We like to go the opposite direction.
Before I leave the property tax discussion, you are a proponent of really empowering and getting the county budget commissions to take a greater role in analyzing the proceeds coming in from the county millages.
Yeah, the decision making needs to be as close to the entities that are affected as possible. And there are certain things that are best done at the state level. I understand that. But there are a lot of local decision making. Every school district is different. Every police and fire department is a little bit different. The 88 counties have lots of subdivisions within those counties. And I really believe that it's best to have the local folks make as many decisions as they can. It's the principle of subsidiarity. And more decision making needs to be down to where the action is. And I think that's going to force our legislation, once we reinstate it in the budget, will give more authority and empowerment to local officials to make those decisions. If they want to live with high property taxes because they want great schools and they want all these other levies to continue to be sustained, that's their choice to do that. But don't blame the state when we don't really levy against property values in the first place.
Right. Property tax is really a local issue. It's a local grassroots type of an issue. I want to, before we wrap the program up, I want to talk to you. You alluded to it a few minutes ago, but that is about the Sports and Culture Fund, the Browns Economic Development Project. And, of course, the lawsuits are happening back and forth now, and that was expected. However, there was a story recently that talked about how the unclaimed funds will never be replenished once they go out the door. Well, it wouldn't be necessary to begin replacing the unclaimed funds with tax revenues coming from the Economic Development Project, because how much comes into unclaimed funds every year?
It was never our intention to replace the $600 million or the $1.7 million in total, because there's no need to do so. We have somewhere between $200 and $300 million every year coming into unclaimed funds that is renewed. I think they log them in twice a year in the Commerce Department, and so what we're going to be getting, we're going to get our $600 million back in incremental taxes in 16 years, with the $100 million guarantee from the Browns to make sure that we don't miss any of those targets. And after that is paid back, after we get the $600 million back, which goes in the general fund, which is going to allow us to have more money to deal with schools and Medicaid and all the other programs that we do, that we're going to continue to get those incremental taxes even beyond the 16 years. The stadium's life is expected to be 50 years, okay? Perhaps even longer with renovations that would be made. So we're going to continue to get those taxes. It's probably several billion dollars after we get our $600 million back that we are going to get in the foreseeable future from that. That is a great return on investment. Replenishing or paying back the unclaimed funds is not the issue, is not the question that should be asked.
The money will be there for another 10 years if anybody wants to make a claim on the dollars as well. There is a lawsuit, of course, an attempt to have a class action suit saying it's unconstitutional to take from the unclaimed funds, but somebody has to have had some type of harm, right, for them to sue. So there is no harm because the money's there, and you can make a claim for another 10 years on those funds.
Right. No legitimate claim will be denied or will be unable to be funded. And so we had a substantial amount of legal work done in advance of this idea as we developed it. And anybody can file a lawsuit, of course, especially in Franklin County. But we believe that you're exactly right, as you pointed out, that for there to be a valid claim to have standing, you have to have been damaged. And nobody has been damaged, and nobody will be damaged here.
They like to use the narrative stealing the taxpayers' money. Well, no, the money's there. By the way, it's not tax dollars. It's unclaimed funds. It's not general revenue funds. It didn't come from your income taxes. It came from payouts from banks, insurance policies, things that they couldn't track the person down. And the initial money that went out for the Sports and Culture Fund, that money had been there already for 10 years. Right. And what is the overall balance right now within the Commerce Department for Unclaimed?
Well, since we haven't dispersed the funds in the budget just yet, right now it's 4.8 billion was the last number I heard that is sitting in unclaimed funds. Now, not all of that has aged out 10 years yet, but it's in the process of doing so.
So almost $5 billion with $200 million every year.
Right.
Right.
It's a big number.
State Senator Jerry Cirino, Republican from Kirtland, Ohio. Thanks for your insight and perspective. Always good to see you.
Pleasure. Thank you, John.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.